Hey guys, welcome back. For today's video, I wanted to do something more lighthearted. Over the past few videos, I regularly brought up that Genshin has a lot of untapped potential. Lack of content, existing content being kind of repetitive, and an overall number of things that are great in concept but could use better execution. A few weeks back, I made a community post asking what you guys think are the 5 most important things needed for Genshin to mostly cross-reference it with my list. Needless to say, the majority of us share the same ideas, which are the things we've been asking Hoyo to implement for going on over a year now. So let's make a video about it. I'm going to be presenting 5 things that Genshin Impact desperately needs. Granted, there's like a billion things it needs, but if we were to narrow it down based on immediacy, I figured these take precedence. This video will be divided into 2 segments. The first is systems and mechanics, which will range from things like user interface to quality of life, stuff like that. Second will be the actual content, such as features, new additions, changes, etc. The first mechanic I think is heavily requested by a lot of players would be a discernible HP bar on player shields. I'm honestly surprised Hoyo didn't think about this considering they add HP bars to shields for enemies. This would be extremely easy to code into the game, you just gotta apply the same class and script to player-made shields. Given that a lot of units in this game have built-in shields and how shields in general make up the bulk of a lot of party composition survivability, knowing exactly how much shield you have left is essential, because unless players memorize their Zhongli shield or what have you, and they're literally counting the amount of damage as it's taken, there's no way to tell how much you have left, and knowing gamer luck, the moment your shield breaks is when you get chain staggered and blown to pieces. By extension, I think all entities that are capable of taking damage should also have an HP bar, such as Ganyu's Flower. If structures like the Hilichurl Towers are able to have health bars, I'm sure temporarily instantiated game objects can have the same thing. The second mechanic, and now that I think about it, this really should be the first, is a proper lock-on or targeting system. This seems like an innocuous change for most of us, but for the diehard bow and catalyst mains out there, this would be an absolute godsend. In my catalyst video, I basically summed up that lack of proper target selection severely hurts ranged attackers, and so does lack of proper kiting functions. One game I think has a fantastic targeting system is Nier Automata. You can control your android and have them do completely separate actions while your pod fires autonomously at a specific enemy even if you're not facing it directly. You can also press the shoulder button to change who the pod should lock onto, which comes in handy against the swarms of enemies you encounter in that game, not unlike that of Genshin. If bow and catalyst users had a way to choose which enemy in a large cluster to focus their normal attacks on, that would dramatically increase the usability of many characters like Yoimiya, Klee, Fischl, even Yanfei to an extent. Third system is the ability to toggle constellations. In totality, the only character who would actually benefit from turning them off would be Bennett, since everyone else stands to only gain from constellations, so this probably won't matter the moment he gets replaced by a better pyro support. For those who don't know, Bennett's final constellation, Fire Ventures with Me, is a powerful one, granting all melee attackers bonus pyro damage and imbuing them with pyro. Ordinarily, this would seem like a very worthwhile thing to have, with pyro being a very strong offensive element. But as you know, not every character is designed around pyro damage. Keqing, Eula, Ayaka, and Ito, to name a few, get mildly screwed over by the forcible pyro imbue, preventing Bennett from comfortably synergizing with every character in the game. Some players choose to not activate his final constellation entirely so he can be used in any party composition. But of course, that means you forfeit the bonus pyro damage, which reduces the efficiency of teams that can weaponize it like Raiden National or Hu Tao. Again, this literally applies to Bennett and only Bennett to my knowledge, but if in the future we have constellations that make a character more exclusive, being able to turn it on and off based on the situation would be a nice quality of life feature to have. Fourth mechanic is an invincibility marker for bosses. With a lot of enemies getting iframes such as the Wolfhounds or Abyss Lectors, being able to know that they're invulnerable by outlining their health bar or something will lessen the likelihood of players blowing their ace moves at the wrong time. Heaven knows I do. Last feature would be the ability to skip dialogue cutscenes. Look, I'm a writer, I studied writing and narrative storytelling as a double major, but there are some events where there's just too much talking. Lantern Red event especially, holy crap, it was 90% talking, 10% doing. I love Keqing as much as the crazy Keqing main subreddit, but that was quite a long slog to go through. Please add a skip cutscene button for players who don't like to sit through hours of dialogue. Okay, so that wraps up the 5 mechanics and systems I think Hoyo should add to Genshin. Now we can get to the important stuff, the content. Right out the gate, there needs to be a major overhaul of the game's existing Resin system. We've been voicing our concerns on this ever since day 1, but it's getting worse and worse. As the game progresses, the demand for resin continues to increase. Characters are being added to the game at a pace exceeding how much total resin we have accessible per day. 180 resin is generated per day, which means you can either do 9 domains and or ley lines, 4 bosses, or 3 trans domains, assuming you used up the discounts. That's not a whole lot of stuff you can get per day. Forget artifacts, players have to dedicate a few days worth of resin just to get one character to max level, then another few days worth of so for talents, and then another few days worth or so to level up their weapons. Generally, with every new version update comes a new character or even two. 2.6 saw Ayato, 2.5 saw Yaemiko, 2.4 saw Shinhe and Yunjin, 2.3 had Ito and Goro, 2.2 had Toma. Pretty much every new update has a character, and if you think about how much resin you have to invest into each character, there's simply not enough to go around. I understand not everyone has every character that comes out, and usually the ones who can afford to do so can also afford resin refreshes, but the point still stands, free-to-play players, the majority, are stretched too thin. We need a global reduction of resin cost, or remove resin cost entirely for certain activities. They can either do that by making non-guaranteed or low-frequency resources resin-free, such as the weekly bosses, given that you can only obtain rewards once a week anyway, or the artifact domains, which has an obscene amount of improbability already. We don't need to time gauge something like that. Alternatively, Hoyo could maintain resin costs as is and introduce ways for players to farm resin outside of waiting for it to slowly regenerate over time. If you think about other gacha games, they usually have daily quests that restore your energy, usually a lot of them, or if your account level goes up, it automatically refreshes all your energy. We do have fragile resin gifted to us every so often, but in light of how little there is to do in-game on a day-to-day basis, adding daily or repeatable quests for transient resin would reward players who play Genshin for more than 20 minutes a day. On the subject of artifacts being resin-free, the artifact system as a whole needs a massive overhaul. If you're new to my channel, I suggest you watch my dedicated video to learn more about it. But TLDR, the main issue with artifacts is that it's time-gated. You can only go into artifact domains 9 times a day, and there's far too much randomness to the point where even if you do score an artifact with a good main stat and substats, there's no guarantee the substats you want will level up or even get high rolls. So what I think they should do to make grinding artifacts less soul-crushing is threefold. 1. Decrease the amount of randomness. Currently, there are 4 elements that are left up to random chance. The main stat for your hourglass, goblet, and circlet, then randomized substats, followed by random upgrades every 4 levels, on top of random upgrade amounts ranging from a low roll to a high roll. As someone who unironically enjoys a touch of RNG in games every now and then, this is just excessive. You can remove even one of those random elements and it will still probably be too much. But if I had the liberty to, it would be the random substat upgrade. I'm fine with getting random main and substats because that's part of the fun of it. But nothing feels more disappointing than getting an artifact with a perfect main and subs, only to have the bonuses go to the less optimal ones. If players could choose which ones to upgrade, that would significantly diminish the disappointment, as even if you score low rolls, at least you will still end up with the right kind of things. 2. Introduce artifact loadouts and presets. Genshin does have filters to sort things out, but it would be more convenient if we could have gear presets. Almost every gacha game worth their salt has them, and I'd imagine the player base would very much appreciate this. 3. I was also entertaining the idea of adding Substat Rerolls. If we're going to keep all the elements of randomness in place, then perhaps add a system where the player can sacrifice one artifact of the same kind to reroll substats, or maybe add an item that resets an artifact's level back to 1 so you can try again. You'd still probably have to reroll a good number of times, but at the very least, the hardest part, that is getting an artifact with good substats, is taken care of, and after that, it's only a matter of time before you get a decent roll. So I used to play MapleStory for many years, and while upgrading equipment in that game was no short of infuriating, you only needed one copy of an item to work on, since they had items that let you recoup lost enhancement slots, reroll substats, what have you. You didn't have to throw it out if you got an unlucky roll. I mean, with Star Forcing there was a chance it could explode, but you didn't have to start from scratch every single time. So with enough patience and, money, you will eventually perfect that item. Another example would be Minecraft's Anvil. Prior to version 1.4, if you got a bad enchantment or an underwhelming one, you were stuck with it. You had to make an entirely brand new pickaxe, sword, chestplate, etc. and enchant that, which is very reminiscent of Genshin's current artifact system. Now of course we have the Anvil, which lets you upgrade like a sharpness 4 sword to a sharpness 5, or you have enchanted books, which lets you put Silk Touch on a tool that doesn't have it. It would be amazing if we could have some semblance of adjustments for artifacts. Not only will it reduce the frustration of artifact farming, but it will also add a tangible sense of gratification once the player finally perfects one. Moving on though, there needs to be a few things added to fix up the new player experience. I made a video on that one too, so if you're interested in learning more, feel free to check it out after this one. Among other things, with how most of the new characters released have ascension materials that can only be accessed much later into the game, new players are essentially barred from using 5-star characters beyond the original 5 in the standard banner. To combat this, first order of business and the most obvious one is to update the standard banner to include new units. Now I know what you're thinking. If they do this, we'll get to a point where there's a billion 5-star units like another gacha game. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I'm sure it would be really awkward for Shogun and Kuting to be in the same pool, even though the former is like 10 times stronger than the latter. But mostly no, because Genshin releases only like 1 or 2 new units a month as opposed to 5 or 6 for other titles, and I never said we had to add everyone to the standard banner. Hoyo can pick and choose which ones will be added. I personally think Venti, Klee, and maybe Albedo should be thrown into the standard pool. Those 3 came out in 2020, so they've been around long enough. Next thing to do is add some form of global ascension material to the game, but make it very expensive so as not to get rid of the incentive of collecting each original character's material. For the sake of argument, let's say you have to exchange 5 Windwheel Asters for 1 global, or 5 Core Lapis for 1 global. We already have conversions for elemental gems or the weekly boss drops, so I don't see why we can't do it for this one. That way, someone who just joined the game and snagged Ayato won't have to wait until Inazuma to actually use them. It would also help existing players get the stuff they need, especially for the extremely tedious ones like the friggin' Violet Grass. And the final thing is to make all resin-based content free up to a certain adventure rank. While the point of time gating is to make players stay committed to the game, new players just starting out essentially missed out on over a year's worth of resin that they'll pretty much never be able to make up. By making all activities resin-free temporarily, it can let newer players catch up to old ones instead of being permanently behind for their entire Genshin career. And since resin is directly tied to leveling up your adventure rank, people can't abuse it by staying under that rank the entire time, so it already has a built-in anti-cheat, so to speak. Okay, 2 more to go. Genshin needs more endgame content, or at the very least, repeatable content. Spiral Abyss is effectively the only true test of strength for players. Trance domains are easy, regular domains are easy, and events don't even come close to taxing a player's mechanics or team compositions. I'm not necessarily saying that all content should be as challenging as Spiral Abyss, but there should be a reasonable progression of difficulty relative to how far the player is able to go. At the present moment, there isn't any. The game stops being a challenge by around level 70 or 80 for your units. Furthermore, there's literally nothing to do in this game besides farm artifacts, talents, and stuff. What's the point of working on characters if there's nothing challenging? Every now and again, Hoyo throws us a bone with a fantastic event, like the 3 Realms Gateway offering for Enkanomiya. That was a really fun one. Or the Labyrinth War, because I like that one a lot. But those are transient, only around for a couple of weeks and then gone. The base game is entirely devoid of anything to do. Other gacha titles have a plethora of late game stuff to work towards. I know I keep bringing this up, but Final Fantasy Brave Exvius had Dark Visions and Clash of Wills, 2 game modes that force you to use every possible strategy to get the maximum score possible. Others typically had some kind of recurring thing like raids, PvP, or something to keep players busy and grinding while they have the occasional event. I think I speak for most people when I say I don't even spend 20 minutes a day on this game outside of events. Do I think Hoyo should focus on catering Genshin towards sweaty tryhard gamers? No. But there's legitimately nothing to do. Everything there is to do is gated by resin. Last but not least, more co-op stuff. Cross-platform co-op, maybe PvP. I personally haven't used co-op in like over a year because there's no practical benefit to doing co-op versus solo. In the beginning when we were all starting out, multiplayer was the only way to take on higher level domains. But aside from that short period of time, I never did co-op. There was no incentive. Players need a pragmatic incentive to play together, like maybe there could be a daily quest you can do that gives you 120 bonus resin if you do X, Y, and Z with other players. That's a start. Or maybe if they ever decide to add boss raids, we can have giant parties of like 30 people all cooperating to take it down. It can bring us back to the old days of MapleStory or WoW or the modern days of 14 where it took an entire army of people to fight a boss. Genshin has the foundation in place to implement all of this. If they did, the game would be so much more enjoyable. All in all, a good 90% of the stuff I said in this video is logistically feasible for this game, which is all the more reason why it boggles my mind that they aren't doing this. One would think by increasing the player's enjoyment for the game, it would lead to more community loyalty and by extension, more profits. Or who knows, maybe implementing the systems is easier said than done. Except it isn't. Stuff like the artifact changes, you can hire someone fresh out of college to do that. But anyways, that concludes my list of 5 things Genshin desperately needs, or 10 things rather. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my choices in the comments down below. If you disagree, feel free to share your own list. Aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and don't forget to check out my video on artifacts and new player lockout after this one. For now though, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.